Hey guys, welcome back to 247 DIY and another episode here with the WRX. As you can see, it's back up in the air, which is never good. Basically, I took the car out shortly after the last video. I went to get it inspected. Everything went more or less okay with the whole inspection process, but I was on 1/8 of a tank of fuel. I went and filled up on gas. Car was running great, drove around just for a little bit. I brought it home, parked it here in the shop, came out, and I had like a dinner plate size of fuel underneath the vehicle. So I went ahead and just off camera here is the fuel tank. We pulled the fuel tank out and we determined that there's a leak in the fuel tank. We'll get to all that in a second, but I'm gonna throw you over to some cell phone video. It's the first time I've recorded really with my cell phone, so I apologize if the quality's bad. But let me show you, what happened when we got back and how we went about getting the fuel tank out and all that, and then we'll be right back with you.
Alright, so this is the rate at which the fuel is dripping out. And this has been sitting for a couple hours now, so this leads me to believe that it's leaking from somewhere. I don't think it's just like a pressurized overflow for some reason. It's obviously leaking from somewhere. Whether that's a hole in the tank or whether that's a line leaking, I don't know. The last time this happened, this didn't do this, but I also didn't inject the rear end up in the air, which obviously is going to bring more fuel to this side of the tank. So I'm just going to let this sit overnight. I don't like the idea of the car sitting in the shop with gas like this, but there's nothing around that should be able to ignite it.
So it's just the next morning, guys. It came back out, and unfortunately it's still dripping. I was thinking if it stopped dripping that maybe I would just remember not to fill the tank so much and I'll go the rest of the summer, and then this winter when it's off the road is when I'll drop the tank and look at it. But if it's still dripping like this morning, then I don't know. I should probably drop the tank and get a look at it. I don't know what's going on. I remember the last time I dropped the tank when this happened, I didn't notice anything. If it's still dripping like this right now this morning, then it shouldn't be a line because, most of the pressure would be off the lines. It's got to be a hole in the tank somewhere. So I guess I'm going to be off to Harbor Freight to get some gas cans and some fuel hose so that I can drain this tank and drop it. Alright guys, so I'm sorry for the bad cell phone quality. I'm just not in a hurry to actually set up for like normal filming right now. But I need to get that tank to stop dripping, so I got to bring the fuel level down in that tank at least till the store's open and I can go get some more tanks. So unfortunately, all of my 5-gallon tanks that I use for like lawnmowers and stuff, they're all full. But I did have this tank, but it was mostly empty. So I've just run a line off the outlet from the fuel pump, and I've set the car in a test mode that you use for like flashing maps and stuff, which just cycles the pump on and off. So it's not the fastest, but it's slowly filling this tank with fuel. And hopefully once that's full, that'll be enough so this tank at least stops dripping, and I can at least get all the gas fumes out of the garage here and feel a little safer working in here. Okay, so after draining out about 4 gallons or so, it was still dripping. So I lifted the front end up so I could lift the rear end up more so I can make some progress on at least getting the subframe in the back down so I can drop the tank, because the stores aren't open yet, so I might as well maximize my time. Now that the car's level, it's not dripping anymore. It completely stopped dripping. So probably the combination of getting some fuel out of there as well as it's leveled out now definitely tells me that the leak's got to be near the top, but it's got to be toward the front part of the tank. So that's where we'll be looking if I get this dropped here. All right guys, quick update before I run to the store. I just wanted to show you guys the easier way to do this, because what a lot of people do is they undo their trailing or their lateral links back here. They completely undo the diff and the drive shaft and all that, and it's a lot of extra work. You can do it this way and you have enough room to get the gas tank down, but first thing you do, take your caliper off, hang it up out of the way because that's going to stay with your strut. You disconnect your strut, you disconnect your sway bar. You're going to do that on both sides, and then you can see right here this little end for your like T-brace that holds the tail portion of the diff up. There's the bolt that holds that up and this plate. You take those bolts out and that plate out of those, and then your parking brake lines run up underneath. There's a 12mm bolt just to give yourself some room so these don't pull too hard. You undo those, And then because the bolts for your ABS sensor, they usually snap if you try to take those off. So I already have my rear seats out anyway. You can just disconnect these in the cabin and then drop them down through and let them hang, because otherwise the brake lines will pull on those. Then you just put a jack underneath your rear subframe. You take out your 4 subframe bolts and you can lower that down. Now I have it resting on blocks, not because you really need to, I don't think, but I just didn't like the idea of it free hanging. But it's basically at its lowest droop right there. I just put the blocks there so it can't get pulled down. I think the only thing it's actually hitting on is that T-brace is actually smushed up against the rubber hanger for the exhaust. And this shouldn't be too much of an angle where you're stressing the drive shaft. It should be perfectly fine because I have done this before, but you can see that gives you enough room where you can undo your fuel tank and you can pull your fuel tank right out. All right, and I just got back from the store, got the right length and longer length of some fuel hose, and I didn't want to have to spend the money, but it is what it is. Bought 3 5-gallon gas containers, so that should be able to drain the tank out. All right, so I ran into another little speed bump. This is barely full, so maybe 4 gallons, and we drained maybe 4 gallons earlier, so 8 gallons, half of a 16-gallon tank, and it's just spitting fuel out now. I'm gonna pull the access covers off the seat in the back. The only thing I can think is if in this test mode it only activates the fuel pump and not the jet pump, the side of the tank with the fuel pump on it may be empty and this side of the tank maybe not, so we might have to figure that out. So this side of the tank's definitely empty. Unfortunately I couldn't get the cover off the jet pump because I can tell I'm just going to snap those studs off. Those bolts are real rusty on there. They're just going to snap those studs off. So I think I'm going to take my chances. I mean, 8 gallons of fuel is still going to be kind of heavy. If there is, half this tank full, it probably wouldn't be 8. It's probably going to be like 6 based on, what I drove on and burn off on my way home, plus what leaked out. And like I said, we probably got about 4 gallons out first thing this morning, and then that one over there is not quite full, so probably another 4 gallons. So that's half a tank right there. So I think I'm going to do that in the worst case scenario. It's always going to be easier coming down out. We can always tip it, get the fuel over on, or I don't know, figure out a way to dump the fuel out so that it's lighter when we go to put it back up in. Then there's 3 lines here on the driver's side of the tank. The one with the orange clip there is the same as your fuel pump. If you've ever done that, it's not too difficult. You don't need any special tools. Just pinch the sides and kind of work at it. It'll come off. The other one slips off. The one back there that you just need to disconnect a little further back because there's no room to get it up there. There's going to be a little fuel in there, so just have some towels down or something to catch the fuel. It's just a little bit. It's going to pour out of there. And then what I did is I just used my jack and a 2x4 to support the bottom of the tank here. It's not, holding up a ton of weight, but it's just so you can let this down a little bit, because what I've already done is there's a vent here, right there, that you can get undone, but then there's some other lines here that you don't have access to unless you bring this tank down a little bit. So obviously you're going to have your filler neck needs to come up done. There's a little vent line here. There's this bigger line here. Looks like there's another vent line here we'll have to get to. And then I do remember from the last time, on top of the tank somewhere, it may be this little electrical connector here. There is a small electrical connector, sorry, you're out of frame there, that you're going to have to find. But yeah, so you just want to undo the hoses that run to your filler neck and your evap canister here. All right, guys, so I haven't took a huge look at this yet, but honestly, I'm at a little bit of a loss. You can see here where there's gas pooling. I don't really notice any of a leak, but you can see it's kind of wet up into here, which is why I kind of wanted to get this tank out quick, so that I could try to be able to identify the leak based on wetness on the tank. If it shows up on camera, you can see that it is kind of wet up here into this area. So did it come down here? I don't know. Let me get this cleaned up and take a closer look. Well, there's the culprit, guys. I really didn't notice anything at first, so I stood the tank up on end so all of the fuel in there came down to this side, and you can see it's coming through in a couple areas here, and then mainly right here. So I don't know if I want to try to fix this tank or get a new one, but I know that moving all this stuff over is probably going to be a giant pain in the butt. And I don't know what sourcing new ones these are, so maybe I'll look into that. Yeah, I don't know, because obviously you've got your jet pump, fuel pump I'll swap over, that's not a big deal. I believe these are your like pressure reliefs, like when you fill up, that's what allows the extra air out of the tank over here. And then I think underneath here is your, in the event that you roll your car, it doesn't allow any fuel to come out of these lines. Yeah, I don't know, I gotta look into options here. This is annoying. And that's what we're up to now. Car's still in the air, tank's out. We're gonna go ahead and patch the pinhole leak that we found in the tank and hopefully throw the tank back in without any issues and get this car back on the road. So you can actually see right here, we have a small pinhole rust leak here, and then there's actually two thin spots. So you can see them here with a little bit of fuel. They're not rusted all the way through, but they're actually so thin that they do allow a little bit of fuel to pass through. And then one other area I'm just gonna pay attention to a little bit, because when I showed the picture before, and you could kind of see where the wetness was, it does show some wetness up in here, and I did notice there was a little gouge in this black coating they put on this tank, and a little bit of rust here. I don't actually think that this is through, and I'm not even sure this is leaking, but since we're here and we're doing this repair, might as well go ahead and just throw some repair over the top of this, in case that is seeping through that point there too. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean up the rust and stuff here on the tank, obviously using a brass brush here. Don't want to cause any sparks or anything. We're going to clean up these areas so that we can go ahead and throw a patch on here with a fuel tank repair kit that I bought. Alright guys, and this is what I'm just going to use. This is a fuel tank repair kit. It's made by VersaChem. Basically it just consists of an epoxy as well as a patch of fiberglass. So we went ahead and just cleaned up all the rust and corrosion off the surface here with a brass brush. Cleaned up the area with some brake clean just so that the epoxy would have a good clean surface to bond to. Then we mixed up the epoxy from the kit, and utilizing the brush that's included, we just brushed it on. I went quite a bit wider than where the actual fiberglass patch is going to sit, just that the epoxy is going to cover all of the actual rusted area you can see there, and that'll hopefully kind of lock it in and seal it and prevent that rust from growing or getting any worse. We just placed the fiberglass right along the rib in the tank there. That was where the biggest pinhole leak was, and then reapplied more of the epoxy right over top. Once it was dry, we just went and covered everything with some self-etching primer. And then I bought this rubber here on Amazon to replicate the rubber patches that Subaru uses. I tried spray adhesive first, it didn't work, so I just ended up using some pretty strong double-sided tape I'd bought a long time ago, and that seemed to work really well. Replaced the smaller one up here at the top as well. And then just to kind of give everything a uniform look and just overall kind of seal everything up into a nice repair, we covered everything with some spray on undercoating. And then it was just time to move on to reinstalling the tank now that it was all patched up. Kind of a pain at this part of the project just because I wasn't able to get all of the fuel out of the tank, so it's a little hard to wrestle with, but just one of the things you got to take your time, just go a little bit at a time, and eventually you'll work the tank back up in there. And then we went ahead and reconnected all of the connections along the top of the tank. You need the room here before the tank goes back up. So just the fuel pump, electrical connector, as well as the fuel pump hoses here, and then routing the rest of the electrical harness back over the top all the way over to the jet pump sending unit on the other side of the tank. Then it was time to get out the tank all the way back up in. I just used a 2x4 here right along where this depression is in the tank just to pry it up in place so that I could get the left-hand side strap up and just thread it in a little bit. You can see it right there, and that was enough to hold the tank up so I could move on to the next part here, which is to start to get the evap lines hooked up. You had that larger one there I just connected, and then this smaller one here to the left of the filler hose. Those need to get connected back up. Then the tank is ready to get lifted all the way back up in, get the right hand strap back on, connect up the filler neck there, as well as this last evap line that runs over to the charcoal canister. I found that was the easiest way to disconnect this line rather than on the top of the tank. It's just really hard to get to where that connects to the top of the tank. And then all was left was to hook up the fuel lines here on the driver's side of the tank. There's one right here, which is just like your fuel pump as far as the connection, and then two soft lines with just some spring clips there up above. Then we just went ahead and used our jack here to lift the rear subframe back up into place. And secured it back up with the 4 mounting bolts. Went ahead and took the ABS sensor lines, routed them back up into the cabin, and connected those back up. Reconnected the parking brake cables, and you can see there the ABS cables have a little bracket. They all connect up right in the same spot. Reconnected the rear diff T-brace back up in with those brackets there. Bolted our struts back up to the knuckles. Threw our calipers back on. Hooked the end links back up to the sway bar and installed the exhaust back up under the car. And then get it on the ground and try firing it up. All right, so everything seems normal. There's no leaks or anything like that. It did throw a code right at first. It was P0183, fuel temperature sensor A circuit, high voltage or something to that effect. All I did was I used my access port to reset the codes on the computer and then started it back up. And there's no code right now, so I'll keep an eye on that. I believe that sensor is in the fuel pump assembly, so if that comes back, I may have to pull the fuel pump assembly and just make sure all the connections are tight there. But for now, it looks like that code's off, and we can go ahead and get the interior back together. So first, we have to throw these access covers back on. They're pretty simple. They just have this foam piece that goes underneath and the cap that goes on. All right, so now we need to get these trim pieces back on here. They go right here. You're going to have 2 bolts up top, 2 bolts on the bottom, a push pin that goes right here, and now So with all that, I'm happy to say that the WRX is running great. Seems to have done the trick. There's absolutely no fuel leaks, which is good because dropping the fuel tank was annoying enough the first time I had to do it years ago, and having to do it now was not fun. It's also nice to know now exactly why I was getting the fuel leak. Now I know it's been repaired, shouldn't be an issue. I actually forgot to film the outro to this episode, so this work was done earlier on in the summer. We're into January now when I'm filming this outro, and I drove this all the way up till about late October. We were still getting good weather this year before I took it off the road. So 4 or 5 months worth of driving, absolutely no fuel leaks. So I'm confident the fuel leak's been sorted out here on the WRX. I had another episode that I was gonna put out, but I feel like I'll just go ahead and throw everything here as an update for the end of the season, if you want to call it that, for the WRX now that it's off the road for the winter. Basically, I'm having some issues, not the end of the world issues, but I'm having some issues occasionally at wide open throttle. I think it may be an issue with the tune, but unfortunately I tune with an access port. When I tuned this originally, it was way before the green speed update, so this only has a single high flow cat in it. If I were to switch and try to get this tuned again now, it's debatable whether or not I'd be able to do that with the green speed update. Being that this is so old, I may be able to get around a tuner not being able to turn off the check engine lights. I know that the delete for the factory catalytic converter that's in the up pipe, this already has the resistor trick. You can just put a little resistor into the plug, and that will tell the factory computer, it'll think that EGT sensor is still there, and that's what monitors that cat on this particular car, is simply just an EGT sensor. So that can be solved with a mechanical fix like that. The only other one, like I said, there's just a single high flow catalytic converter on the downpipe for the exhaust. Again, this is old enough where I may simply be able to space the oxygen sensor out with the spark plug non-fouler trick, and that may get my light to go off, and then they can tune all of the other stuff. I don't think, because this isn't some crazy horsepower tune or anything like that, I don't think there's any other hurdles that a tuner would have issues with post green speed update, simply other than they can't shut the check engine lights off anymore for the catalyst and everything like that. But those are the only two things I messed with. Like, it's still got TGVs. I was going to delete the TGVs, but now I'm just going to leave them because that's a whole headache now with the green speed update. But for now, like I said, it does run good. It runs good. Just occasionally there's kind of a little bit of, not even a misfire, just it feels like wide open throttle, third gear, there's kind of a dead spot where it's not building boost. And I noticed this year especially, I never noticed it before, or I don't believe it was an issue before, but I noticed it now. The access port actually shows a lot lower boost than my boost gauge does. So I need to narrow down where both of those sensors, I mean, I know where my boost gauge reads from, but I got to figure out where the factory boost sensor is that goes to the computer. So maybe there's a boost leak in between those two spots. I don't know. I got to figure out where the factory sensor is, where it reads boost from on this. But drivability wise, it drives absolutely fine. So I ended up, I replaced the plugs. I don't know if I mentioned in a video or if it was in a comment to a video responding to some people years ago. It doesn't seem like that long ago. This was off the road years ago. But years ago, the last time I did the plugs, I was under the impression, I got some faulty information that iridium plugs don't need to be gapped. They come with the proper gap, which the more research I did, I found that's not true. And those plugs I just threw in the car. So I did throw a new set of plugs in the car, make sure that they were properly gapped. Car felt a little bit better. It's more that, if you're familiar with the term, like the butt dyno, it wasn't night and day, but it felt like the car was a little bit stronger. We also cleaned the MAF out nice and good to get the MAF cleaned up, reset the computer and all that, and it felt a little stronger, but there's still that weird dead spot on a wide open throttle pull kind of near the top end of third gear. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's an issue with the tune. I never did quite get the tune like 100% squared away when I was doing the e-tune process on this car, because right towards the end when the tuner was having difficulty dialing in the boost was when I got the huge misfire issues. And then I went online and immediately went to worst case scenario, and we thought it was a compression issue, and it turns out it's not a compression issue, and it was just, I don't know, it was just something. It was something going on that has been sorted out since with a lot of the work that I've done. So, like I said, I had a ball this summer driving the car. Can't wait to get it out again next year. But that's that. We might start off next year doing some other simple things like, changing out the PCV valve, may help things. Just little cheap little things. Checking the various sensors now that mileage-wise, there's not a lot of mileage on them, but years-wise, I mean, we're talking 20-year-old vehicle here. So, but yeah, that's where the car sits now. It's up for the winter. It's off the road. That's not to say there's not some good content coming out. If you've been following this and you're excited about the car, I've got a pretty big project slated for the next couple months to work on over the winter. Something I've never gotten into before with any of my cars in the past, and I'm really excited because I've always wanted to do this to one of my cars. So stay tuned for that. Really excited about that, but that's all I've got for you. If you watch simply because of the fuel issue, like I said, that patch has been working great. I was driving on it for months and months and absolutely no issues. That's squared away. And if you're watching just for an update on the WRX, stay tuned. We got some good stuff coming for over the winter before this goes back out on the road late spring. So as always, guys, make sure to hit that like button. Feel free to leave a comment below, and if you're not subscribed already, please go ahead and subscribe. Thanks.